said that they met Mr. Smith, and then they between Mr. Smith and Mr. Gavin Watson, and there were payments made to Mr. Smith, and then there were also repairs that were made at the house of Mr. Smith. Mr. Smith thereafter filed an affidavit in response to the evidence and the affidavit of Mr. Agrizi, and Mr. Agrizi, likewise, although very late, filed an affidavit. Mr. Agrizi's affidavit was filed, unsigned was filed last night, and then the signed one, I'm instructed, is just been filed. As a result, it's not in the file before you, but it's going to be given to me, and then we'll hand it up, and then we'll place it accordingly. What we have today, Chairperson, in front of us is BOSASA Bundle 2. And this continues. BOSASA Bundle 2 contains some affidavit, some exhibits. It contains T20.1, which we dealt with yesterday, and it does not feature in this proceeding, Mr. Vincent Smith's affidavit.
Oh, okay. Well,
so they go in as annexures. So
then, if it's annexures, then you might not be able to do anything with that, except that.
Chair, for instance, you will see
the one at page 0 or 102 comes before Mr. Smith's affidavit, so it can't be an annexure. It's a covering letter, I think, saying here is his affidavit.
Yes.
But we don't have to go through everyone, just as long as you get a chance to apply your mind to the question whether everything that's here is relevant.
Yes.
Because there have been times when bundles are put up, you look at the bundle, it's full, but ultimately...
No, I get your point. And then it also can get also confusing when the report has to be written. Now, when one has to recall whether a certain issue was referred to, and does it form part is it part of the record or not? But no, I understand.
So no, that's fine. Yes, I think Mr. Akrizi's evidence with regard to Mr. Smith, it was Mr. Akrizi's evidence together with that of Mr. Leroux.
Yes.
Related to 3 matters. Well, one, it is that the thrust of Mr. Akrizi's evidence was that for a certain period of time, they were trying to get Mr. Smith to cooperate with BOSASA. I use my own word when I say cooperate, so that he could assist BOSASA with regard to certain matters, and he was not giving them any attention, and they had to speak to Mr. Cedric Froelich to get Mr. Froelich to talk to him, and he said after Mr. Froelich had talked to him, and I think after some meeting or meetings, then Mr. Smith, according to Mr. Akrizi, had a changed attitude towards them and cooperated. And he said that BOSASA gave Mr. Smith money, I think he said every month. And then he said, so that's, I think that's the sum total of it.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, all right.
And if I may add there, Chair, on the papers, the real issue is whether there were monthly payments, because the amounts paid, 2 amounts paid for the daughters university fees are admitted, and the only issue there is whether it was a loan or
Yeah.
it was merely money given.
Yeah, a
And
bribe
then, yeah, it's a
or a
bribe.
reward.
Or, yes,
Yeah.
or a present. And then insofar as equipment is concerned, also there's no dispute there. The only dispute is about the amount of, the value of the equipment that was fitted.
Yes. Yeah.
So as I agree with the chair that it's almost, the inquiry is almost, the evidence is almost on a limited issues.
Yeah. Okay, all right. You said you were ready, but I understand that there may be a request for some time before some adjournment before we start,
Chair,
or not?
the reason why there was an indication of a short adjournment in time is because the affidavits of Mr. Agriz and Leroux were received late, and apparently there has not been sufficient time to consult with the client. But the legal representatives of Mr. Smith are here, and can they address you now
Yeah.
and see what they want?
Yes, they can place themselves on record. No, let him go to the podium. That must be sanitized first.
Morning, Chair.
Good morning.
Chair, my name is Moroka Palani, Junior Counsel for Mr. Smith. My leader is Malindi SC, who for reasons of being on duty as an acting judge is unable to be present today. Mr. Smith is very eager to proceed today. Although there were documents that have material bearing on today's proceedings that were only received last night, and I personally only saw them this morning. He has, however, still given us a preliminary indication that he's still eager to proceed, with a proviso that in the event that any of the documents that were delivered late are to be relied upon, we would request a brief recess to apply ourselves to those. I don't think it will exceed 30 minutes to consider those, but all in all, he is still eager to proceed with today's proceedings.
Yes. I think it might be better that I give you time, or give him time to look at the documents before we start, so that when we start, it's smooth. We also avoid, if we can, an arrangement in terms of which he might have to come back and all of that. We do sometimes just to avoid witnesses coming back, say we'll send written questions and an affidavit can be prepared, but it's not ideal, but sometimes it can be done. Looking at how narrow the issues are, I have no doubt that there is enough time for us to finish with his evidence today. So, because as I understand the position, payment for the daughter's studies, he doesn't, that payment was made. The only question is whether it was a loan or simply a bribe or a reward for what may have been seen by BOSASA as cooperation and him assisting them. with regard to the security features in his house. In his affidavit, he seems to accept that that was done, although I came across something, I think a statement that may have been issued by the ANC on his behalf, which suggested that the security features at home were not installed by BOSASA. But that statement was admitting the money that was paid in regard to the studies of the daughter, but saying it was a loan. But it was saying that as far as security features at home, that had nothing to do with BOSASA. But obviously, if I understood that statement correctly, Mr. Smith will deal with it. So the issues are quite narrow. So I think maybe I should give you some time. We are at 10:15. I can give you up to 11. That gives you 45 minutes. And I guess that should be enough.
More than enough, Chair.
Yeah, and then we can start at 11, then we won't have a tea break, which we normally have at 15:15. We'll then just go on.
As you please, Chair.
Is that fine?
That is in order, Chair.
Okay, all right.
Thank you.
All right, then we are going to adjourn, and we will resume at 11 o'clock.
Thank you, Chair.
We adjourn.
All right.
Testimony today, or was scheduled to hear testimony today from the former ANC MP Vincent Smith regarding allegations he received security upgrades and other benefits from BOSASA over a 3-year period starting 2015. He is keen, as you heard from his counsel, to give testimony, so I'm sure they will peruse over these documents and they'll be back at 11 o'clock with Vincent Smith taking the stand. Let's take a quick break. We'll get you more news next. Stay with us.
The special rapporteur on the right of everyone to the enjoyment of the highest attainable standard of physical and mental health. Congratulations on your appointment.
It's fantastic. I think to be entrusted and given the responsibility of such a big mandate is something that I don't take lightly. The biggest role as a special rapporteur on health is to advise the UN on the global trends that are emerging. So that work continues.
Welcome back. Eskom says it will reduce power outages to stage 3 from this morning. The power utility increased load shedding to stage 4 amid cold and wet conditions and continued power outages at some of its generating plants. Eskom says stage 3 load shedding will take place until 10 tonight. Load shedding is likely to last into the weekend. Meanwhile, the power crisis was discussed in Parliament as Deputy President David Mabuza answered oral questions before the National Council of Provinces. Mabuza said a turnaround strategy for Eskom would be implemented soon to ease the pressure on the national grid.
Plant breakdowns, age-old and ill-maintained infrastructure have been attributed to stage 4 load shedding that continues to plague the country. The rolling power cuts have caused a furore among South African citizens who have called on the government to fix the crisis at the ailing state-owned enterprise. Members of Parliament did not hold back in grilling the Deputy President over issues at Eskom. But Deputy President David Mabuza says the nation must believe that there is a silver lining.
South Africans must be confident that we're going to get out of this problem. Why am I saying so? Is
Are we ready to start?
Chair, we are ready to run.
Okay. Please administer the oath of affirmation.
Please state your full names for the record.
Vincent George Smith.
Do you have any objection to taking the prescribed oath?
I don't.
Do you consider the oath to be binding on your conscience?
I'm sorry. Was that I have?
I don't.
Oh, you don't?
I do not.
Okay.
I do not.
Okay.
Do you consider the oath to be binding on your conscience?
Yes, I do.
Do you swear that the evidence you will give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing else but the truth? If so, please raise your right hand and say, "So help me God."
So help me God.
Thank you. If you don't have any problem removing the mask, that may help Mr. Smith. Yeah, okay, thank you. Thank you. Yes, Mr. Noche.
Mr. Smith, there is in front of you a file, and I believe we've gone through it with your legal representatives, and the file is BOSASA Panel 02. Do you have it in front of you?
I do, Chair.
And what you should do is just go to what is written there is T20. You have it on there?
I do have it, yes.
Mr. Smith, I think just keep it, keep the...
Yes, you may keep it on, yeah.
Keep it on, it's going to... Now, Mr. Smith, can I take you, what we are going to use when we refer to numbers, we're referring to the black numbers.
Yes.
It has nothing to do with race, but it's just the...
Those are the ones on the top left corner of each page.
Yes.
Now, Mr.
Well,
Smith...
actually, that's not true. Because not every document in this bundle has got black numbers, I realize now. Those at the beginning don't seem to have, but they have nothing to do with Mr. Smith. I think probably all those that relate to Mr. Smith have got the black numbers, but you'll just have to make sure, Mr. Noche, that if you are going to have other documents in this bundle, then they must be consistent. You have in this bundle a set of documents that have black numbers and red numbers.
Yes.
And then you have a set of documents that only have red numbers and not black numbers.
The ones relating to Mr. Smith?
Yes. And I'm
Which ones
saying
are
that
those, Chair?
you have a file that's different from the one I have.
No, I don't. I don't believe.
Then you should know if we have the same file, because the first page relates to NP Mokonyane.
On T30 is the first is...
This is the file that is here.
Yes. Is that BOSASA Bundle 2?
Yes.
So we're not dealing with Ms. Mokonyane. I've taken
I know
the witness
that. That's
to...
why I'm surprised. But I expected you to know, because my file must be the same as your file and the witness's file.
Yes, it is the same.
But if you don't have that, that means our files are not the same.
They're the same, Chair, but the...
But how can they be the same if you don't have, at the beginning of the file, Ms. Mokonyane's documents, and I do have?
I have that. But you remember...
I thought
Chair,
you said you don't have.
No, I didn't say that, Chair. All I said is that I've referred the witness to... Before we adjourned, I referred the chair to bundle, BOSASA Bundle 2, and then I said to the chair, in it, we have T20.1, which we dealt with yesterday. And today we're going to deal with T30 when it's admitted. So today we're not dealing with T20.1.
I don't think you are listening to me.
I am listening to you.
Okay, now let me repeat. I know that in this bundle, you have documents relating to Mr. Smith,
Yes,
but I'm saying you also have documents relating to Ms. Mokonyan in the same bundle.
yes,
Okay. And you said that with regard to Mr. Smith, he must know that when you refer to page numbers, you'll be referring to the black numbers.
yes,
And then I said, I realized that not all documents that are in this bundle have got black numbers.
yes,
There are those that don't have black numbers at the beginning.
yes,
And you asked which documents, and I said they relate to Ms. Mokonyane.
yes,
And I was saying if they are going to be kept in this bundle,
yes,
where there are some documents with red and black numbers, then there must be consistency. They must also have black and red numbers. But if that is not going to happen, then they should go to another file which will have only the red numbers. That's what I was saying.
that's fine, Chair.
But I thought you were saying you don't have the Mokonyane
No, I have
ones.
Mokonyane. All I'm saying is,
And do yours also only have red ones, Mokonyane's ones?
yes,
Yes. So that can be dealt with later. I'm just saying, if it's in the same file, it's going to be confusing if some documents have got black numbers and red numbers, and others only have red numbers. But that can be sorted out later.
that's fine.
Yeah. Okay, all right.
Now, Mr. Smith, can you, in your file, there is a divider written T30.
I do have it.
And now on that, on the black numbers, can we then look at page 103?
I do have that.
Now, there is the affidavit. It's Vincent George Smith. You see that?
I do say.
And then, can I ask you then to turn to page 135?
Yes, I'm there.
There's a signature above the words, actually about the name Vincent George Smith.
Yes, I see it.
Now, whose signature is that?
That's my signature, Chair.
And then go and in the end, look at, and is it correct, let me put it that way, that document has got annexures, and those annexures go to page 209.
Yes, I am there.
Now,
Sure.
Smith, is it correct that from 103, page 103, to 209, that is your affidavit?
That's correct, Chair.
And you confirm the contents of this that as your affidavit?
I do.
Chair, can I apply for leave that this affidavit of Mr. Smith be admitted as Exhibit T30 together with annexures?
The affidavit of Mr. Vincent George Smith, appearing from page 103, is admitted and together with its annexures, and will be marked as Exhibit T30.
Thank you, Chair. Now, Mr. Smith, this affidavit, your affidavit and your appearance today before this commission was as a result of the affidavit and the evidence of Mr. Agrizi, is that correct?
That's correct, Chair.
And then you also had access and you responded to the affidavit of Mr. Richard Leroux.
I did, Chair.
And you start with your affidavit referring to some issues that there were before between your attorneys and the commission. But on page 117,
Yes, sir.
on section C of your affidavit, you deal with what you call financial assistance by business to civil servants and activists. Can you, in your own words, tell the chairperson what you are saying there?
Indeed.
And Mr. Smith, you are free to look and read from your affidavit if you so wish.
No, I'll attempt to
It's,
talk to it.
It's much better if you talk
Yes.
and only refer to the affidavit to refresh your memory.
Chair, I was attempting to contextualize not only my affidavit, but the situation in the country post the unbanning of the ANC. And I state there, Chair, that because many of our comrades came from outside and were unable to survive, including those inside the country that were on the run, it became clear that business, or in fact, business adopted what we call a corporate social investment program, I suppose, to assist people. And I think the intentions at the time were very noble, that they assisted those that came from outside and those that were inside. And many of them, Chair, and I hate using political parlance, but we refer to them as the patriotic bourgeoisie. In other words, businesses that were favorable to us. And they assisted us in many ways, in getting us to school, getting us education, getting us houses, and so on. And I believe that unintentionally could have been the beginning of this conflictual relationship between business and activists or politicians. So what I'm saying, Chair, that this is not unique to post-1994. It was in fact as a result of the situation that we found ourselves in after the unbanning. So that is the context in which I was trying to lay it, Chairperson.
If we come to the case at hand involving BOSASA, when did you say in your affidavit you met Mr. Gavin Watson, I don't know, about 1990. Was it part of what you have just testified about?
Indeed, it was part of that, Chair. And I raise it to illustrate that my relationship with the late Gavin Watson preceded my election to Parliament. At the time of the unbanning, the ANC had a program where we had to rebuild the structures in the country and also to develop communities. And the way we did that was to approach friendly business people, if I could put it that way. And one of those friendly business people that we approached was the late Gavin Watson, because he was a comrade. And he assisted us in many, many ways. So my relationship with Mr. Watson, the late Mr. Watson, precedes my election as a public representative in 1994. And I wanted to put that in context, and I'll continue referring to that, Chair, so that people understand that it was not a public representative relationship. Thanks, Chair.
Now, at that time, was Mr. Watson, did he have any relationship with BOSASA? Did you know anything about that? What is his relationship with BOSASA?
No, I didn't have the intricate details of what his relationship was with BOSASA, but I did know that Mr. Watson was a businessman. I did know Mr. Watson was a comrade. And I did know that every time we sought assistance, he never hesitated to assist us.
Now, when you were elected as a member of parliament, what portfolio committee did you occupy? Were you part of?
I was elected as a member of parliament in 1999, and I served in the portfolio of the Standing Committee of Public Accounts, and I think I served in the portfolio committee of public enterprises, Chair.
And then did you at any stage serve in the portfolio committee of correctional services?
Yes, I did. In the third parliament, in other words, from 2009 to 2014, I was the chairperson of the portfolio committee on correctional services.
Now, if I understand, the work of the portfolio committee is the work of the parliament, sort of supervising, overseeing the work of the executive. Is that correct?
That is correct, Chair.
Now, on a day-to-day basis of those committees, what do they do?
We did many things, Chair, but in essence, ours was to, as you say, do oversight over the portfolio committee, over the department, I beg your pardon, Chairperson. So we would ask questions of the department, we would engage with them, we would also engage with stakeholders, so that we as members of parliament were clued up with the subject matter, whether it was correctional services or justice or whatever the case was. But that in essence was our work, and also, of course, passing laws and passing the budget.
And if I understand the work and some part of your affidavit, the portfolio committees had the power to call the officials of the department to appear before you.
Indeed, we had that power. That was our core business, to interact with the department that we were responsible for.
And in that process, you would pose questions and investigate any issues that concern you regarding the running of the department.
Yes, it was. Yes, we were able to do that. We had the power to do that.
And you would also question the issues of the award of tenders, and if there's any sense of irregularities, you'll raise that with the department. Am I correct?
Well, we would raise it with the department not because it came through us, Chairperson. The way it worked is that the Auditor General, in his annual reports, if he picked up any irregularities, would be in the annual report. And on the basis of the information in the annual report, we were at liberty to say, but the Auditor General says that there was this and that irregularity, but it was not the core business of the Portfolio Committee. That was a function of the Auditor General. But there was nothing stopping us from saying the Auditor General has indicated, please explain, Mr. DG.
Okay. Mr. Noche is asking you on an issue that might be important in the context of your evidence, but it's also important for other parts of the job of the commission, and I want to take this opportunity to look at that before he goes into the meat of today's evidence. Now, you just said that was not part of our function, but we had the power to ask, this is what the Auditor General says, but I didn't understand what it is that you say was not part of your function.
No, Chair. What was not part of our function was to interrogate or to do the initial investigations of irregular, unauthorized, that type of thing. Mm-hmm. That was the speciality of the Auditor General in his audits.
Okay.
And on an annual basis, the department was obliged to publish an annual report. Mm. In that annual report was the Auditor General's report.
Yes, yes.
So when we called the department, we were at liberty to talk to any matter in the annual report, which included the Auditor General's report. And if there were any red flags that the Auditor General had raised, we would ask the department to explain that to us. Yes, Chair.
And in terms of what you could do, and again, I'm just going to something that's important for different reasons for the Commission, in terms of what you could do as the Portfolio Committee, if you found that you didn't get satisfactory answers from the department or from the relevant minister or the DG, or if you formed the view that things were getting out of hand, what is it that as a Portfolio Committee you could do about the situation? In other words, did your powers end with just talking, or would there be some concrete action that could follow if either the relevant minister or the DG and his or her officials were effectively refusing to do the right thing about sorting out certain things in the department?
The reality at the time, Chair, was that Parliament only had powers of recommendation. We could not instruct the executive what to do or what not to do because of the doctrine of separation of powers, as you are aware. But I can now, Chair, say to you that in my other life, post-2019, I chaired the Committee on the Auditor General. And we passed in 2013 or 2012 the Public Audit Act, which gives the Auditor General significant powers to do the things you're talking about, including referring matters to law enforcement agencies, which was not there prior to the Public Audit Act being amended, Chair. So at the time, ours was just to raise the red flag, but it was up to the department and the political authority to fix it up.
Yes. You may or may not be able to express a view on this, but I'm going to put it. It seems to me that constitutionally, one of the things that Parliament can do in a situation where a portfolio committee is really unhappy about how certain things are handled in a particular department, say correctional services, and they've called the Director General, they're not satisfied with the answers, they've called the Minister, they're not satisfied, but they can see that there are real problems. It seems to me that the committee probably can report to Parliament, to National Assembly, and the National Assembly can deal with the Minister in terms of him accounting in the National Assembly, but ultimately the Parliament could say we are going to pass a vote of no confidence in the President if the President doesn't get this Minister to fix this, or we'll pass a vote of no confidence in the Cabinet, because it looks like Parliament can pass a vote of no confidence in the President or in the Cabinet. If it passes a vote of no confidence in the Cabinet, that means they don't have issues with the President, they just have issues with his Cabinet, and then he must reconstitute his Cabinet. But Parliament can also pass a vote of no confidence in the President and his Cabinet. Obviously, that's quite drastic. But it seems to me that if there are really things that are really going wrong in a government department and a portfolio committee or Parliament have called the officials, the DG and the Minister, and they've given them enough time to fix things and they're not fixing them, and they've asked the President to make sure that these things are fixed by his Minister and nothing is happening, that's an option that Parliament always has. Is that something you have a view on?
Yes, Chairperson, I do. I agree with you. More than that, Chairperson, we also, when I say we, I'm saying Parliament, also on an annual basis approves the budget. So Parliament theoretically could not approve that budget. The difficulty with that, Chair, is that you will then be punishing South Africans who are the beneficiaries of whatever that service is, at the expense of an official or two, or even a cabinet minister who might not be doing his job. So yes, you could deny them that budget, but in reality, the real casualties will be South Africans. So it's a very difficult decision to make, but theoretically it's possible.
Can be done. I guess that if you have before you as Parliament a real case of a stubborn department, a stubborn minister, a stubborn DG, let's say there's rampant corruption and really nothing of any significance is being done, even after the relevant portfolio committee has been saying, sort this out, and nothing is being done, and they've run out of patience. They could say, well, as long as you are the minister of this department, we're not going to approve this because we have no confidence in you. You are not prepared to listen. You can't manage. But if the President wants this to be passed, then he'll have to change you and get another minister, because we are satisfied that you are not prepared to listen. You are incompetent. So does that sound like something that would be an option?
It sounds like an
In other
option.
words, you, as Parliament, the idea would not be that you don't want to pass the budget completely, but you want to exercise your power in the interest of the people. Because you are saying it's not in the interest of the people of South Africa that this minister continues in this portfolio because of A, B, C, D, and you have clear evidence. And you say we have even spoken to the president, and nothing is being done. So actually passing the budget so that this minister continues with it is actually it can't be in the interest of the people.
Chairperson, there is a Public Finance Management Act that is very clear on how public funds must be spent and the consequences thereof. Admittedly, that was not implemented to the full. Had it been implemented to the full, it would have addressed half of your problems. But secondly, Chair, as I indicated, we have, I keep on saying we, but Parliament has given the Auditor General extensive powers post-2013, where even the Auditor General has the ability to raise these matters with the relevant law enforcement agency. So I think that will be a deterrent. And no minister will, in future, will not want to be found wanting to be referred to the SIU or to whoever the case might be. So I believe it's a step in the right direction. And once that kicks in, it's a year old. We passed it my last year there. But I think in a year or two, we'd be able to see the fruits of that new Public Audit Act and the powers of the Auditor General, Chair.
No, that's fine. I will allow Mr. Noche to continue. But I just say that I've no doubt that the increase of the powers of the Auditor General in this context is really a step in the right direction. But my concern is that it would appear that a lot of people in the country don't really care about who has what powers when it comes to wrongdoing. I mean, if you think about the fact that this commission has been sitting since 2018, hearing evidence of wrongdoing and corruption and so on, you would not think that the kind of corruption that we are told about in regard to PPE would be happening. But it's like people say, nothing will happen. So we can just continue as normal, you know. Nothing will happen. And that may well be because they look around and say, what has happened to who? People do things and nothing ever happens. So we will do them. Nothing will happen. So I agree that it's a step in the right direction, but it's quite concerning. I mean, if what one reads in the media about the PPE corruption, it's frightening, and it happens at a time when there's a commission looking at corruption. So it's like they say, nothing will happen. I mean, it happens at a time when we have a lot of law enforcement agencies who are supposed to be specializing in dealing with corruption, but people just don't care. But anyway, but thank you for your views in regard to this aspect that I wanted to explore with you. Thank you, Mr. Noche. You may continue.
Just, Mr. Smith, can you just complete what the chair asked you to do, just to give us an overview? What is the role of the portfolio committees insofar as the approval of the appropriation bills, the appropriation of the budget to the department? What is the role of the portfolio committees?
Well, initially the department would present its annual strategic plan and its proposed budget to the portfolio committee in the first instance. It is there where the real work gets done, where the portfolio committee will interrogate the department trying to understand what is it that this budget is going to buy or do. The portfolio committee thereafter writes a report to Parliament. In other words, 11 of portfolio committees would write a report to the 400 saying, we've interrogated Department X, and in our view, we think that this budget is appropriate. Parliament then has a second bite as a body when the Minister of Finance presents his budget to then approve the overall budget plus the various departmental budgets. So there's two bites at the cherry, one at the portfolio committee level and one at a National Assembly level, Chair.
And you say at that level, at the portfolio level, the portfolio committee can then report to Parliament that this department has misspent its budget on item X, and therefore item X should either be reduced or not be approved.
Indeed, we do that, Chair. The way it works in reality is that the minister there would be a debate on the budget. The minister would present the budget and what it is that he or she hopes to achieve, and members of the portfolio committee, in response to the minister's input, would then be able to raise the issues that we've raised. You're asking for X, Mr. Minister or Mrs. Minister, but this is what's happening in your department. So all members of the committee then are able to respond to the proposals that the minister is putting, and that's how the process works in Parliament.
I see. Now, Mr. Smith, let's deal with the matter at hand. And you say in your evidence and in your affidavit, and Mr. Agrizi also confirms this, that's the first time you met him was when he came to Parliament offices. And who brought him to the offices?
In terms of who brought him to my offices specifically, in fact, he never came to my offices. But Parliament was facilitated by the Chair of Chairs, Mr. Frolik, who had indicated that there was a delegation that wanted to see me. And at that point, I went to see them in a venue that Mr. Frolik had arranged with the delegation.
Can you just tell the Commission, what is this, I've said the Chair of Chairs, what does that mean? What is that title?
Portfolio committees have chairpersons, various chairpersons, but there is an individual who's responsible for all portfolio committees. So he's the chairperson of those of us that were chairpersons. So he was overall in charge of the work of portfolio committees, if I could put it that way.
So, Mr.
Does that mean that there is a forum which consists of chairpersons of various portfolio committees, and he is therefore the chair of that forum, or there isn't a formal forum?
There is what we used to call the meeting of chair of chairs, once quarter, but I don't know what the regularity was. And the chair of chairs presided over that meeting, yes, where all chairpersons of committees were in attendance.
Okay.
Do you remember the year when, it's not clear on the affidavits, the year when this delegation was brought to you?
Yes, I remember. The year was 2009. I was elected chairperson in 2009, and we really started our work towards the end of 2009. And this delegation was probably one of the first 2 or 3 stakeholders who had requested to have a meeting with me or introduce themselves to the new chairperson. So it was in 2009 chairperson.
You referred to the chair of chairs. Was that Mr. Frolik at that stage? Was it somebody else?
I'm not sure. In 2009, I'm not sure, but I do know that towards the end, Mr. Frolik was the chair. But I'm not sure who was the chair.
I'm referring to the person that you said brought them, Mr. Agrizi and whoever, to you, or who said to you, there is this delegation. I thought you said it was a chair of chairs, and I'm asking whether that was Mr. Frolik or that was somebody else.
The point I'm making, Chairperson, it was Mr. Frolik in terms of the human being.
Yes.
But was he the chair of chairs at that point, or was he not the chair? I'm not sure at this point.
Okay.
Now, you met this delegation, and it was Mr. Agrizi and Mr. Njenje, is that right? And it became clear They introduced themselves as from BOSASA, is that right?
That's correct.
Now, did the name BOSASA ring a bell to you at that stage?
I beg your pardon?
Did the name of the BOSASA as a company ring a bell to you at that stage?
It rang a bell to me to the extent that I knew that Mr. Watson was involved with BOSASA because I had a relationship with him. But I was brand new in the portfolio committee, and I really didn't, at that point, get to grips with what it is that they were providing or not providing to the department. So yes, I knew the name BOSASA by virtue of my relationship with the late Gavin Watson.
Now,
I'm sorry, Mr. Noche. Going back to Mr. Frolick, his role in introducing, if that is what he did, the BOSASA delegation, or mentioning to you that there is this delegation that wants to see you. Are you able to say whether there was a role he had in Parliament that might have made it understandable that he was the one who brought them to you? For example, if he was chair of chairs, maybe it was because you were the chairperson of this committee, so you were a member of the chair of chairs forum, if you know what I mean. But if he was simply a member of Parliament and no special role, do you know whether he's bringing them to you might simply because he bumped into them in the passage and they said, we're looking for Mr. Smith's office, and he said, okay, I'll take you there. Or it might be because of some special role that he had at that time in Parliament.
I don't have the answer to that. I don't know that. I don't know.
Yeah. Your impression at that time, was it like he bumped into them, or you can't remember?
Chair, if he was the chair of chair at the time,
yes,
I could understand that he wants to make the committees
yes,
or Parliament work better.
Yes,
yeah,
yes,
if he was the
yes,
chair of chairs at the time, as I say, I'm not sure what portfolio he had at the time.
Yes,
but other than that, I'm afraid I'm not.
Yes. Okay. No, that's fine, Mr. Nosha.
now can you remember what part of the month of 2009 when these were brought to you?
I beg your pardon, sir.
Can you remember what month of 2009 was this delegation introduced to you?
No, I don't. What month?
Yes.
No, I don't.
And I understand at that time, in 2009, you were the chairperson of the Portfolio Committee on Correctional Services.
I was the chair of the Portfolio Committee on Correctional Services, that's correct.
Yes. The reason why I'm referring you, I'm asking about the month, is this. If you just turn to page 241 of the record.
241.
241, yeah. Remember the black
Yes,
numbers?
sir. Yes, sir. Yes. I am there, Chair.
Okay. Now, these are the minutes of the Portfolio Committee meeting of the 14th of October, 2009. You see that?
I do, Chair.
Now, if you you're so kind to turn the page to this item starts at 243, item 3.3.
Yes, Chair.
Now, it deals with nutritional services.
I see that.
Now, if you go over the page on 244, it reads, I just want to read the minutes. It says, Mr. Selfie noted that the latest BOSASA contract, which was essentially a continuation of the earlier one, costed DCS, I suppose that's Department of Correctional Services, 838.3 million. The re-award had resulted in the transfer of the then National Commissioner of Sports and Recreation Department. BOSASA had been awarded the contract despite being under investigation by the Special Investigation Unit. According to the IS report that still had to be presented to the committee, the SIU has uncovered evidence of corruption and of the supplier manipulating tender specifications. The SIU recommended significant recoveries and seizure of assets, and has referred the matter to the National Prosecuting Authority, NPA. He sought clarity on how, despite the company having been under investigation by a state institution, the DCS had awarded the contract to them again. So what I'm trying to say is, we know now from these minutes, but in October, the issue of corruption by BOSASA had arisen and he had been voiced in the portfolio committee.
That's correct, Chair.
So when you met these people from BOSASA, had you already seen this report?
Again, Chair, I'm not sure when we met them, but chances are we met them before we saw this report. This is the activity of the portfolio committee. My recollection is that most stakeholders wanted to meet or introduce themselves to the chairs as soon as possible after. And I think I was elected as a chairperson around about July. So if these minutes are in October, it would probably be after the initial attempt to meet with me.
Now, I'm referring you to these minutes, because the evidence of Mr. Agrees is that BOSASA was having a problem regarding allegations of corruption. So the suggestion was that an issue they had to talk to you so that the noise can come down. And here it's clear that there was an issue about the corruption of BOSASA. Do you see that?
I do see that, Chair.
So when you met...
Oh, I'm sorry, just ask.
So when you met them, did you know that these are the people who are accused of corruption?
Chair, no, I didn't meet them. Let me clarify that point. Mr. Frolic brought me into the room where they were sitting. And because I was very uncomfortable with meeting them, I thought it was an ambush, to use my own words. I had no exchange with them. So no, I did not meet with them in terms of whatever. I think at the end of the day, they just dropped a brochure with me. And if that meeting lasted 1 minute, it was a long time.
Yes, because they had not made any appointment.
Yes, Chair, they had not made any appointment. And even if they had made an appointment, at the time I would have refused it because I was not up to speed with the workings, and I had refused all other stakeholders until I got to grips with it. So had they made an appointment, they would not have had an opportunity to see me because in principle I was not up to speed with the workings of the department.
Yes, okay.
And in the documents we have for the commission, going further to page 251.
251.
251, yes.
I'm sorry, Mr. Noche. Are these minutes standalone documents or are they annexed to some affidavit?
No, they are standalone documents, Chair.
Because they'll have to be admitted as exhibits in their own rights if they are standalone.
I understand, Chair. No, they are standing alone, and Chair, you will... Can we then, can I deal with them? And then at the end of the minutes.
Okay, all right.
And then I'll ask for an admission, and then I'll ask for an appropriate number.
Yes.
If it suits you. Can I just deal with them now?
Yes, that's fine.
Mr. Froley, what I will do is I don't want to waste time on these minutes, but starting from, remember the first page I referred to was page...
Well, what of course Mr. Smith can do, because I see it would appear he signed them, is confirm that they are minutes of the Portfolio Committee on Correctional Services relating to the meeting of that committee on 14 October 2009, if he's able to confirm that.
On page 250.
Yes, sir.
It seems as if this is the confirmation of the minutes of the meeting of the 14th of October. Is that correct?
That's correct, Chairperson.
And that is your signature above your name?
That's correct, Chairperson.
Yes. Okay. I think that's the appropriate time, Mr. Notcher, to tell me what I must admit it as. Or if you are not ready, then you can remember
Chair,
later on.
I'll remember that later on. I just need to discuss it with the records people, but I'll make a note of it.
Yeah.
Chair,
okay.
because my impression is that this can be admitted as T31, but I don't want to confirm it now.
Yeah,
Let me
okay.
confirm with.
Okay.
Can I do what you suggested with the other hearing, that I sit with these records people, we give the numbers to these, and then one morning before any hearing, I then come before you and then put on record what numbers we have placed.
Well, I thought that was not an ideal arrangement, but we were forced into it. If we can, I was hoping that by the time, at least at some stage, you can say what exhibit it should be. There is no reason why you would need to talk to the record people, because, or I think, as long as you know which one is the first exhibit and which one is the next, and then we can give them whatever exhibit numbers, as long as the exhibit numbers won't cause confusion in terms of two documents sharing an exhibit number.
Yes.
But maybe maybe during the lunch break you can apply your
Yes,
mind.
no, I will.
Okay.
I will.
All right.
Thank you, Chair. And then?
Let's continue.
Just
So
me-
these minutes, then you'll, hopefully after lunch, we can have them admitted.
No, that's fine.
Yeah.
Mr. Smith, and then 10 to page 251.
I am there, Chair.
And this is a meeting, these are the minutes of a meeting of the Portfolio Committee again on Correctional Services. And it's dated, the minutes are dated 17th of November, 2009.
That's correct, Chairperson.
And you were the chairperson of that committee meeting.
I was, Chair.
Now, this meeting again, on page, if you look at page 151.
151.
251 or
Oh,
151?
sorry, 254, I beg your pardon. No,
254.
254, I beg your pardon.
I am there, Chair.
Is this a different meeting from the meeting of the minutes?
It's a different meeting from the other.
Or do we have a date of the meeting in the document somewhere?
It's at 251, Chair. At the top is the meeting of the 17th.
251 or 254?
No, at 251 is where the minutes begin.
Oh, okay. Oh, this is 17 November.
Yes,
The other one was October, I think.
yes.
Okay, all right. So you said now we
Actually,
must
Chair,
go to...
you'll see, you'll see that just the previous page at 250. 250, at that 250, I think at the beginning of the meeting of, which starts at 251, it confirmed the minutes of the previous meeting. You look at 250, 250 is
250...
where Mr. Smith signs.
Yeah, that says 17 November, but that's not the date of the actual meeting.
It's the date of the
actual
confirmation.
is 14 October.
Yes. All I'm referring you, Chair, is that the
It's the
minutes
date when he signed.
when you confirm the minutes,
When
they
it's
were
signed.
confirmed as
Yeah,
the minutes. There's the meetings always say they confirm the minutes
at the next meeting.
of the previous meeting at
Yes.
the next meeting.
No, that's
So
fine,
The next
but-
meeting was on the 17th of.
251 does reflect 17 November. Yeah, okay. You said we must go to 254, is that right?
254, yes.
Yes.
Is it correct, Mr. Smith, if you look at the 254 item 3.3, again, the issue of the investigation of BOSASA by SIU is raised.
That's correct, Chairperson.
And if you look at 258, page 258, in February 2003, you then confirmed the minutes, these minutes as the correct minutes of that meeting.
Yes, that's correct.
So we know now that in 2009 already, the issue of the corruption in BOSASA had been raised, and it had been raised in the portfolio committees. And we know now that these people were brought to you, the delegation from BOSASA, when there was this cloud hanging over BOSASA.
That's correct, Chair.
Can you just tell the chair, do you know whether Mr. Frolick would have been privy, would have known these minutes and the discussion of portfolio committee regarding the allegations against BOSASA?
No, I'm not sure that Mr. Frolick could have known about it, Chair, because there was no obligation of portfolio committees to submit their minutes to anybody else. It was our minutes. So it is possible that Mr. Frolick never had sight.
I see. And now, there's also a 259,
Yes.
page 259.
Before
Yes.
259, I'm sorry, Mr. Notch and Mr. Vincent Smith. I see that at 254, 3.3, where it says similarities between 2004 and 2008 nutrition contracts, Mr. Selfie, it says Mr. Selfie thanked the SIU for its work and agreed that the presentation was one of the most shocking he has had since becoming a member of Parliament. The revelations came at the end of a long saga spanning at least 5 years, and he was pleased that there was some progress. He said that everyone knew who the companies at the center of the investigation were, and that therefore there was no point in speaking in code. I just thought that might be important to say, what is the picture that the committee got out of the presentation of the SIU, at least in regard to one member of the committee? It seems that the picture that was presented by the SIU to the committee was one that was shocking to him.
Indeed it was, Chair. Just to put it into context,
Yes.
the beginning of the investigation happened probably around about 2004, 2005, before the current term of the portfolio committee.
Yes.
Mr. Self had been a member of the previous portfolio committee, so he had institutional memory.
Yes.
Thus he says it's the most shocking one. But
Yes.
regardless of whether he had institutional memory,
Yes.
even the report itself, when it came to us,
Yes.
was a very worrisome report, Chairperson.
Yes.
And all of us in the portfolio committee unambiguously
Yes.
agreed with that position.
Okay, thank you.
Now, we want to move on, Mr. Smith, to 259, page 259. And there is the meeting, minutes of the meeting of the same portfolio committee on the 13th of October, 2010. And if one looks at the
I'm sorry, what page did you say we must go to?
259, Chair.
Okay.
You look at page 259, you look at the members of the committee.
I'm
It
sorry,
seems as
this
if-
is now, just to identify the document, this is now a meeting of the Portfolio Committee on Correctional Services on the 13th of October 2010.
Yes,
That's right.
yes.
Okay. Continue.
And Chair, and Mr. Smith, it seems as if you were still the chairperson of that committee.
Indeed, I was the chairperson, Chair. My chairpersonship ran from 2009 to 2014. It's a 5-year term.
I see. And again, but this, just look at page 270. There is, the minutes are not signed, but you have had a look at the minutes. Do you confirm, is there anything which you say this wouldn't be the minutes of the meeting?
I'm not sure why they were not signed, Chair, but having looked at them, giving them a cursory glance, it was in fact a true reflection of the minutes. The committee secretary at the time was very efficient, so I have no reason to believe that it would have been a misrepresentation.
And also again, in 2010, the issue of BOSASA is raised. And on page 261, there is Mr. Selfie, he refers to the Royal Sichaba Holdings claim. But then at the discussion, Ms. Ngwenya thought it's necessary, I'm reading the minutes. Ms. Ngwenya thought it necessary for BOSASA, the company in favor of whom Royal Sichaba had allegedly been disqualified, to also appear before the BOSASA committee. You saw the committee, and then over the page, BOSASA has over the past years received billions from its contracts with DCS. The committee approved the DCS budget each year, yet knew nothing of this company, which is such a major recipient of that allocation.
I'm sorry, Mr. Noche, I didn't hear what page you are reading at.
I'm on page 262, Chair.
262?
Yes.
Okay, all right.
Yes, yes.
Am I right?
Yeah, yes, no, I was looking at the red one, it's right, yes.
So this issue of BOSASA is raised again. And this is what is important for me, is the fact that Ms. Ngwenya, he says, look, we don't know about this company yet. Billions of rands have been awarded to this company, and on a budget that we have approved. Do you see that?
Yes.
Now, if we go over the page, I've taken you to where it's not signed, but you do confirm the minutes. But let's go to page 271. Now, these are the minutes of the Portfolio Committee of 18 October 2011, and you were still the chair at that time.
That's correct, Chairperson.
And then again, if we look at the minutes, the issue of BOSASA is again raised in the minutes.
At what page?
And on page 272, and paragraph 3.2, the DCS report, I'm reading 3.2, DCS reported that the nutrition contract with BOSASA company, which will expire at the end of 2012, the DCS should provide the committee with measures in place to ensure that food services to inmates to the affected centers will not be compromised from March 2012. Now, this was in October, Mr. Smith, and by now you must have known about BOSASA. There have been reports at the Portfolio Committee. Is it correct?
That's correct, Chair.
And yet we know that you met them at Sentin Hotel during that year.
That's correct, Chair.
Now, when you met them at Sentin Hotel, there were already these negative reports about them. What were you meeting them at? Why did you meet them at the hotel?
Chairperson, as I indicated, that ordinarily, when a new chairperson is elected, stakeholders want to introduce themselves, and that was the essence of the first meeting that was aborted in 2009. So in 2011, Mr. Gavin Watson called me to do exactly what they wanted to do in 2009, and at that point, I was more than comfortable to have a discussion because I understood what was happening in the department. Let me hasten to say that it was not only BOSASA that I had met. Most of the stakeholders at that time, I had then agreed to meet with them, and I list them in my affidavit somewhere else. So it was really, for me, an opportune time to understand what is it that stakeholders are doing and what is it that they can offer. And my stock reply, Chair, was once they have briefed me, we advise them to either reduce it into writing or to come to what we used to call a stakeholder meeting, a formal stakeholder meeting, where they were then presented to the Portfolio Committee. So it was really an introductory, preparatory meeting that I was invited to.
Mr. Smith, I don't expect perhaps to have this, but do you have a record where you reported now to your portfolio committee that I met the much maligned BOSASA. I met them at a hotel in Santin, and this is what I discussed with them. Did you report that?
No, I don't recall the details. I have not seen it. But what would have normally happened is that, as I indicated earlier on, any stakeholder that I met, I would either ask them to reduce it into writing or ask them to formally come to a stakeholder meeting. So it was not my decision. It would be a committee decision. So yes, I wouldn't find it strange that after the meeting I would go on back to report to the portfolio committee, because ultimately that's where decisions are taken. No decisions are taken in one-to-one meetings with the chairperson. So if indeed I went to report back to the portfolio committee, it would be par for the course.
Now, were you not uncomfortable to meet in a hotel a company that had been reported to be involved in corruption?
Chairperson, when I was phoned by Mr. Watson a day or two before the meeting, at that point I did indicate to Mr. Watson that I was uncomfortable meeting on my own, because, by the way, it was not a portfolio committee meeting. And Mr. Watson was aware that I would come to Johannesburg weekends, and I was in Cape Town. So it was a simple request: can we meet when you're back in Johannesburg? I indicated to him that I would be uncomfortable going on my own, and I would be better if I went with somebody else from the portfolio committee, so that when we report back, it's not an individual view. So I don't think that because, and by the way, Chair, if you look at the minutes, much prior to this meeting, I and the portfolio committee had agreed that the SIU investigation must continue. And once the SIU investigation has been concluded, they must come back to us and report to us in terms of what they were doing. So it was an ongoing investigation. And I didn't find anything untoward meeting with a stakeholder, as long as I was not on my own, as long as there were no decisions taken at that meeting, and as long as I went to report back to the portfolio committee. That we met at a hotel, Chairperson, we could have met at a restaurant, we could have met anywhere else. I think it was the most convenient place, and I was not uncomfortable with that, Chair.
And I understand, you'll excuse me, I've never been a member of parliament. I understand the portfolio committee has offices in Cape Town. Am I right?
No, the portfolio committee doesn't have offices. Individual members of parliament have offices in Cape Town.
You have a chamber where you meet?
Yes, there's chambers in Parliament, what we call committee rooms, that is shared by all committees. There are those in Parliament, yes, sir.
Why didn't you ask Mr. Gavin Watson to meet you in Cape Town, in your office?
Chairperson, I did allude to it earlier on that my relationship with Gavin Watson precedes me being a member of Parliament. And on occasion, when I was in Johannesburg, we would meet and discuss politics of the day, discuss my constituency responsibilities. And by the way, it was me, and they were a delegation of 3 or 4. Logistically, I was coming to Johannesburg. They are based in Johannesburg, and he asked that a day or two before, and I agreed to that. When I'm in Johannesburg, let's make time to meet. And I could well have called them to Cape Town, but that would have had to happen during the week. I live in Johannesburg. I come to Johannesburg weekends, and I agreed with Mr. Watson, who I have been meeting anyway on other matters, that, okay, we'll find time and we meet. So we could have met in Cape Town, but it made perfect sense to meet in Johannesburg over the weekend when I was in Joburg.
So Smith, at that time, 2011, you knew Mr. Smith, you knew Mr. Watson, you knew that he was the owner, inverted commas, of BOSASA, and you knew that there were allegations of corruption against BOSASA. Did you ever discuss that issue with Mr. Watson to say, comrades, there are these allegations against your company? Did you do that?
I never discussed those with Mr. Watson in the meetings that I met with Mr. Watson. But I have no doubt, Chairperson, that they would have known that there were these discussions, because portfolio committee meetings are public. They were widely reported in the media at the time anyway. But did I discuss them with Mr. Watson? I did not discuss them with Mr. Watson.
Are you able to tell the commission why you didn't discuss them with him? You said you have known him since 1990 as a comrade and person who was assisting with a number of things. Here there are reports that he is company is corrupt. Why didn't you discuss this with him?
Chairperson, and I'm not sure which minutes they are, but we alluded to them, where I made an undertaking to the Portfolio Committee as chair, that there's nothing that we must do as members of Parliament. I think it was with the SIU, that there's nothing that we must do as members that would sabotage the work of the investigation. So for me to go outside of that and to meet with would be to go against a decision that I took in a meeting. And that is why I was very clear to separate politics from my work as an MP at the time, Chair.
And you know, Mr. Smith, that influence and perception is almost everything. Now, if anyone were to say, well, I met a member of Parliament, a chairperson of the Portfolio Committee at a hotel, that person would be seeming to go around with a big cloud. To say, I have the member of Parliament in my pocket. I met him in a hotel. Didn't you think about that?
Chair, I am indicating, or I indicated earlier on that I have and did meet Mr. Watson from 1990, or the early 90s onwards, on matters that related to my constituency and normal ANC work. I also did indicate that I met many stakeholders in various locations, Chairperson. And the third point that I'd like to make, Chairperson, is that whether Mr. Watson had me in his pocket or not as a perception, the separation of powers just did not allow a member of Parliament to get involved in the day-to-day working of any department. So I could not have influenced the department just by virtue of the separation of powers, even if I wanted to. So yes, there could have been a perception created, and I must accept that there must be, but then it could be with any other stakeholder that I met, and I met many stakeholders over the time. This one might be because it was under investigation. In retrospect, maybe there could have been that perception, but there was never ever anything untoward. It was a normal meeting with stakeholders. And thus I said that I'm not comfortable seeing them on my own. I'd rather see them with others that were in the committee. I had no fear of any influence unduly put on, or pressure put on me, Chair.
Mr. Smith, the problem is this. Now we have Mr. Agrizi telling the Commission that they had a problem with investigation by SIU, and they, as a result of that, they were advised to see you, and he tells the Commission, and you confirm it, that you met them at a hotel. Now, we know by the time you met them at a hotel, there is an investigation by SIU, and this has already been reported to Parliament and to the Portfolio Committee chaired by you. And here now is the chairperson of that Portfolio Committee with some members meeting in a hotel with the company that is being investigated. Does this not make Mr. Agrizi's testimony credible?
No, Chair, it doesn't. And I'm glad that we are dealing with the minutes. These minutes span from 2009 to 2013. According to Mr. Grizi's testimony to you, the 2011 meeting was intended to use my words, soften my attitude. The facts of the minutes negate that argument, Chair. I was anti-outsourcing. I was never anti-BOSASA. I was anti-outsourcing in 2009. I remained anti-outsourcing up to 2013, and BOSASA was one of those that were outsourced. So this narrative that the 2011 meeting had the sole purpose of softening me up is not borne out by the minutes that we have. Every minute that is here indicates not only mine, but the committee's strongest dissatisfaction with outsourcing generally, Chairperson. And BOSASA was one of those outsourcing. But there was outsourcing even of private prisons. We objected to it. There was outsourcing of day-to-day maintenance. There was outsourcing of BOSASA. or nutrition, not BOSASA, of nutrition. From 2009 until the time I left, my attitude and the attitude of the department didn't change. So the notion that I was called to a meeting, I was given 45,000 rand to soften my attitude to BOSASA is not borne out in the minutes. And these minutes span pre and post 2011.
You know, when I looked at your affidavit, and I read that part of the affidavit, I went to the minutes, and then I read them with a bated breath, that I'm going to find a place where you are coming out strongly. You are coming out strongly against the continued award of tenders to BOSASA. Can you take me, perhaps I missed the part, take me to these minutes wherein you come out strongly and criticizing the outsourcing and criticizing, sorry, are you looking for something?
I was looking for something and I anticipated that question, but
You want to?
Are you looking for something that will help?
I want to answer that question by way of the minutes here. And yesterday when I was preparing,
Yes.
I actually wrote it down that I want to refer
Well, if
the
you...
evidence leader
Yes.
to answer exactly this question. I'm not sure what happened to my...
Just look for it. Take
It'll take me 2 seconds to find
No,
it.
that's fine.
I think your attorney
I
might
think
help
he would
you.
have it, yes. But I had speaker's notes that...
Yes.
well, not speaker's notes, but I had, in anticipation to these kind of questions, made...
If you are able to tell your attorney where...
I'll put it here, Chair, that...
Yes.
Or what you can do, Chair,
Yes.
if I may,
No, fine.
we can proceed with other stuff.
And then during the lunch break, he could have a
I'm
look.
sure it'll be here now, Chairperson.
You know, instead of Mr. Smith looking at them rushing, let's deal with the other stuff.
Okay.
And then
During the lunch break, you can have a
Lunch
look
break.
at your notes.
yeah, can you quickly do this for me? They are the minutes of the 22nd of February. They appear in page 274.
274.
Just want you to confirm the minutes so that, and then they are confirmed on the 15th of March at 284. Look at 274 and then 284.
Yes, sir. Yes, Chair.
You confirm those are the minutes of that, and they were adopted.
I do, Chair.
And then at 285, they are the minutes of 285 minutes of the 6th of March, and then they are signed, they are unsigned on the 24th of April.
Yes, Chair.
You have looked at this. Do you confirm that these are also the minutes?
Yes, Chair, I do confirm that these are the minutes.
What we'll do, Mr. Smith, we'll leave the minutes for now, and then look at that, and then we'll deal with them after you've found whatever you're looking for. Is that all right?
We can do that, Chair. Yes, we can do that.
Now, you see, we've got the minutes, and then we know what the position is from BOSASA. Now, there's an amount of money which you have admitted was paid to a company by BOSASA.
Yes.
And the first amount is in 2015, and it's an amount of 267 and 667 rand 90 cents.
I'm sorry, Mr. Nash. I think Mr. Smith really wishes to have these documents.
Okay.
If you can give me 2 seconds.
I'll take 2 minutes.
2 minutes, I think.
I'll
I
take
think I've
2
left them
minutes
on top there,
adjournment so
yes.
that he can be
Answer these
comfortable.
questions, yes.
We
Please.
adjourn.
Please, Chair.
And Chairman, I know something is not here.
Oh, no, I beg your pardon. They're here. They're on the floor. They're on the floor.
You know what? It happens to us.
No, they were on the
He will
floor.
tell you, it happens to us all the time.
So you can go back to the minutes.
Yeah, okay. It happens to us all the time. You are in court. You know you've made minutes. You've got notes.
No.
The address. Oof.
You found the documents, Mr. Smith?
Thanks for your indulgence, Chair. I found it and I'd like to respond to them.
Okay, thank you.
And Chair, fortunately, that's got nothing to do with me, the losing of
They were on
documents.
the floor.
You found them on the floor, nothing to do with me.
Yes, okay, all right.
Yes, Chairperson, the question that was raised was there would have been expectation for me to come out unequivocally. I'd like to refer you, Chair, to page 276, point 2.1. The Chairperson's comments. Uh, 2.1 on page 276, Chair. The Portfolio Committee on Correctional Services has always made it very clear that it was not in favor of the outsourcing of nutritional services. That's my comment.
Yes.
I don't think that there's any doubt what it was meant.
Yes.
Over the page, Chairperson, on 231, up 2.3.1.
I'm sorry. Over the page.
278.
Oh, 278.
And
Yes.
not bullet point, but paragraph 2.3.1.
Yeah.
It says members were unconvinced by the National Commissioner's assurance that the DCS would be ready to deliver. Now that is a decision of the committee for a committee that I chaired, so it was part of my decision.
Yes.
I then want to refer you to 2.3.4, Chair. I think it's on the same page. The last paragraph on that 234. It says
This is at 280, yeah?
2.3.4, Chair, on page 280.
Yeah.
Yes. It reads, the committee had on numerous occasions voiced its dissatisfaction with DCS outsourcing of services that it should be doing on its own. Again there, Chair. And I can take you, and those were minutes in 2012.
Yes.
Post the 2011 meeting that the Greasy talks about.
Yes.
And if you so wish, I could take you to similar things in 2013, if the Chair wants to.
Let's do that. Let's do that, yeah.
Let's go, Chair, then. There are minutes dated the 6th of March. I'll just find they are at page 285.
Yeah, it's the next,
yes, Chair, yes.
Yeah.
And then if we go to 371, Chair, which would be, I beg your pardon, 317.
That is now the paragraph number.
That is on page 293. Page 293.
Yes.
On bullet point 317.
Yes.
These are recordings of a meeting that took place in March 2013.
Yes.
2 years after the so-called meeting.
Yes.
It reads, the chairperson felt strongly that should the debate around the constitution of core functions be resolved, in other words, Chair, we were arguing that we must debate what are the core functions because we felt strongly that it shouldn't be outsourced. And those are my comments. And in his closing remarks, we raised it in 318, Chair.
Yes.
We talked to that same matter again. And this is in 2013, after I was supposedly softened up. So to answer your question, Chair, I have no doubt that my stance and the stance of the committee throughout my tenure was not anti-BOSASA, but it was anti-outsourcing, and BOSASA had a major role to play in. So it was not an attack on a company, but it was an attack on the management style, for want of a better word. So there were no holy cows. BOSASA was not a holy cow. And I don't understand, Chair, that if I was getting 45,000 rand to do a job, in other words, to be soft on them, 3 years later, I'm still as harsh as I am, and they continue to give me that money. It just doesn't make sense to me. So I want to debunk that notion that this was what was discussed in the meeting of 2011.
Now, Mr. Smith, now we know I took you to the minutes of 2009, where there was a report about BOSASA, 2011, a report about BOSASA, right? Now, you meet BOSASA people in 2011, and the allegation is to soften you. Now, are you able to do what you have done now? Take the commission where you come strongly and say there's a corrupt company, and DCS keeps on awarding tenders to this company. Remembering, sorry, are you able to do that?
No, Chair. I'm not able to do that in the minutes. Because I don't think when we dealt with minutes, we dealt with individuals per se, in terms of stakeholders. We would deal with the principle. I did indicate earlier on that the Auditor General was the final arbiter, for want of a better word, in terms of whether there was irregular expenditure or not. Secondly, the SIU had embarked on an investigation which we encouraged and we asked them to do, which was specifically on BOSASA. But if the Commission is asking me to show a line here where I said, this company, it's not there. It's not there, Chair. But throughout the minutes, it's very clear that we supported the action that was being taken on that matter, specifically with the SIU. So, no, there's no line item where I said so.
Mr. Smith, look, in your favor and in fairness to you, let's look at page 278.
Page?
278 of the paper.
278. I am there, Chair.
Yeah, these are the minutes of the meeting of the 22nd of February 2012. And now in the middle on paragraph 231, the second paragraph of that paragraph, it says, long-standing members of the committee expressed surprise that the same reasons advanced for the 2008 extension of the BOSASA contract were provided as reasons for the 2012 extension. In the absence of a credible reason for the extension, the committee was left with no alternative but to believe that the contract was extended because some in DCS's ranks had a vested interest in it being extended. The claim that the accounting officer only became aware of the true state of affairs in 2011 was met with incredulity, resulting in some members calling for an inquiry into the most recent extension. So there in 2012, an issue is raised by the members of the committee, unhappy about the extension of BOSASA. Do you see that?
I do see that, Chair,
And I think the point that Mr. Noche is making to you, he said he wants to be fair to you. He says, here is a part where even if there is no special mention to you, but it is reflected that the members of the committee, that this was their attitude, and you were part of that committee. And that's the point he wants to make in fairness to you.
Thank you very much, Chair.
But then, let's take the minutes of the 6th of March, 2013. Minutes, page 285.
285. Yes, sir, I'm there.
Now, if we turn to page 291, at paragraph 3.1, there's again discussion about BOSASA, where it says, while the report, I'm reading the 3.1.1, while the report made some mention of contracts awarded to BOSASA company, it made no mention of the large contracts awarded to the companies Sondolo and Pezulu. Let me just stop there. Did you know at this time that Sondolo and Pezulu were also related to the BOSASA companies?
I did, Chair.
All right, let's proceed. The contracts awarded to the three companies far exceeded 15 million mentioned in relation to BOSASA, and clarity was a special investigation unit. Therefore, the information was not available to be audited. You see that?
I do see that, Chair.
Yes, I'm referring you to this for two purposes. One, I do not read the chairperson's unhappiness about BOSASA because you can see there's a company which has been here since 2009 or in 2013. I do not read the chairperson's express unhappiness about this. Do you notice that?
Chair, I thought I had answered that question. Maybe I should try again. I am a member of the Portfolio Committee. I referred the Commission to at least 5 areas where, as a collective, we were totally unhappy and also supported the SIU. Now, if the Commission is asking, is there a line that says Vincent Smith did it? You are not going to find that, Chair. But I'm convinced that if it's a committee decision that I was part of the adopting, I would imagine that I'm party to that decision. So I'm not sure how further to add it, but I did express my dissatisfaction, not with BOSASA, but with the outsourcing processes of which BOSASA was part of it, Chairperson. So in retrospect, maybe I should have put that item in my name, but I don't think it was necessary, Chair.
I understand. Now, I've taken you to a number of minutes of meetings where BOSASA is mentioned. Now, in 2015, it's not in the minutes. In 2015, you then go and borrow money, according to you. You go and borrow money from the same company that had been that had been part of the discussion in the Portfolio Committee, a company that you knew had been referred to SIU for corruption. Why did you do that?
Chair, I'm not sure that I heard the question correctly, but if I did.
No, let me repeat it before you answer. Or the simple question is, why would you go and borrow money from a company that is clearly involved, that is not clearly, that is reported to have been involved in corruption and even referred to a law enforcement agency?
Thanks, Chair. I thought that's what I heard. Just to clarify, Chair, I did not borrow any money from any company. The loan agreement was between me and Angelo Agrizzi. And there is correspondence to that effect by way of an SMS. My loan agreement was with Angelo Agrizzi. And the reason why I had this agreement with Angelo Agrizzi in 2015, a few months, I don't know the time frame prior to that, Angelo had come to me to ask, for instance, to help him with an unemployed son. I do this all the time in my constituency. And he came to me, and I indeed was able to do that. I, in turn, also went to him when my own son developed behavioral problems. And he referred me to a service provider who could help him with that. So the point I'm raising, Chair, is that there was some sort of a cordial agreement with me and Angelo. And my loan, and it's borne out in the correspondence, was with Angelo. The final point I want to make on that one, Chair, is that nowhere in the records of the deposit, for want of a better word, is there any reference to BOSASA? It was not BOSASA. I had gone to Angelo Agrizzi on the basis of the relationship that we had created, made a personal loan with Angelo Agrizzi. The money was put into my account. I paid for the school fees. It was never, ever a BOSASA agreement. It was an Angelo Agrizzi agreement. So I just wanted to correct that I never made a loan with a company. It was with an individual.
Mr. Smith, you must have thought about this answer. This is your answer. You must have thought about it clearly. And you're serious about it.
I am serious about it.
But you knew Agrizi.
I'm sorry, Mr. Noche.
So I beg your pardon.
I'm sorry, Mr. Noche. Maybe just before we proceed, what were the terms of this loan between you and Mr. Agrizi?
Chair, it was a very simple loan, Chair. I, through the company that I presented to Mr. Agrizi, Euroblitz, hold shares in a minority share, not a BEE share, as Mr. Agrizi says. It's a black-owned company, our own shares. And those shares were to mature in 2023. So it was a matter of cash flow. I went to Mr. Agrizi and I said, I need to pay school fees. I want to pay it in one lump sum so that there's no variation with the whatever. Please advance me the money. And when my shares mature, for want of a better word, I will repay it. To the extent that I presented the the shareholder agreement between me and the company as comfort that this is really what's happening, and also, and it's in my annexures, also a projection of what my cut of the shareholding was. So it was a very simple, I need to pay school fees immediately. Please give me X amount, I will give that back to you. And it was with Mr. Agrizi. The last point I want to make on that one, Chair, is that the fact that I gave Mr. Agrizi my company bank account was because for me it was a legitimate agreement. In fact, my audited financial statements will show that those transactions are raised as a loan in the company, in the audited financial statements. If it was for any other reason, Chair, chances are I would have gone to Mr. Agrizi or to anybody and says, look, you guys give me 100,000 rand according to you per month. Let me use that 100,000 rand and do it. I knew that there was an EFT. I gave them my company account. I have that company account audited, and the audited financial statements indicate it's a loan. I have shares that I hold, which are going to mature. It was a legitimate loan, Chairperson, that I was intending, or I am intending to repay. And that is why it was not undercover or camouflaged or anything else. It's there for, and it has been audited and reported on. So the terms, to answer your question, I'm sorry, Chair, the terms were, I have a cash flow problem, or it is prudent for me to pay overseas in one lump sum. Mr. Agrizi, we have this relationship. Is it possible for you to afford it to me? He did, and I was going to pay him back.
And what was the amount that you asked for?
I didn't ask for amount, Chair. I had received from the university the fee structure.
Yes.
And I gave that to him. That says, this is what, in fact, I had paid the initial deposit, which was about, I think, £2,000 for the registration. Having paid that myself, the account came from the university that says, these are the fees, and your child has been accepted, so go on and pay the fees. So I gave that whole document to, as proof that it was for a legitimate purpose. So I gave him the account statement that I had received from the university. And in year one, because of the rand valuation, in year one, I think it was 200,000, and in year two, it was 300,000, but the figures are there, Chair. And in both instances, I gave him proof of what it was intended to be. And I raised it accordingly in my books.
So the amount that he ultimately gave you, was it in accordance with the amount that you were going to have to pay to the university in terms of the documents you gave him?
Yes, Chair.
Yes.
Yes. In his replying affidavit that I received yesterday, I think there's even a handwritten note where he, I think, translates, and I'm saying he, but I don't know who did it, but there's a translation from pounds to rands.
Yes.
Because It was specifically for that amount, not any other frills.
Yes.
Everything else, in terms of day-to-day living and whatever, I paid for my own purposes.
And he was happy to give the loan. There was no difficulty when you were discussing, when you introduced the subject.
Chair, there was no difficulty. I say,
Yes.
and somewhere there's a SMS, not an SMS, an email, where I say to him, Chief, this is what we had discussed. Here are the proof of it. And there was no, I don't know what you're talking about, or I don't have. I said that, and the money was put into the account that I had given him. So my interpretation of that was that there was no difficulty. I am not sure where he got the money from or who gave it to him, but as far as I'm concerned, I had made that agreement with Mr. Gritzi, and there's an email correspondence to that effect, Chair.
Mr. Noche?
Let's start with this. When you asked, is it correct that when you asked for the money, you sent him an email, is that right?
Yes, correct.
Now, the email appears on page 470, is that correct?
Sorry. For 70.
Yes.
I am there, Chairperson.
And the email is dated the 11th of May. It's from you, Vincent Smith,
Yes,
and it's to Mr. Agrizi.
that's correct, Chair.
The subject matter is Daughter's Study 2015 University of, how do you pronounce that name?
Aberystwyth.
Aberystwyth. Yeah. Sorry, excuse me, I'm a rural boy. It's
Yeah,
difficult.
it can't be an easy word because there is no vowel. Is it a vowel? A, B, C, D. There is no vowel.
only two.
There are only two.
And Chair, I'm a boy from Devenek. It's a rural village in the Eastern Cape. It's just
Aberystwyth.
Aberystwyth. Now, it says, what I'm interested in, Mr. Smith, is the last part. It
Well,
says,
maybe read the whole.
let me read the whole.
Yeah, or he can read it.
I can.
Yes, yeah, do so, Mr. Smith.
Chair, it's an email from me dated the 11th of May, 2015, and it's to Angelo Grizzi. Subject matter, Daughter's Study 2015. Hi, Chief. This email refers to our discussion earlier this year. My daughter has been accepted to study at Aberystwyth University in Wales. She commences in September 2015, and I am in the process of finalizing her trip. She leaves towards the end of June to finalize varsity accommodation and other related matters. I am in the process of sorting out funding requirements for her and hereby request any assistance in this regard. Funds can be deposited directly to the institution if that is more acceptable, and I have thus attached relevant documentation correspondence, and it's for me.
Yes.
And it was addressed to Mr. Agritzi
Yes.
and nobody else.
Yes.
Now, you agree with me that there's no, in this email, there's no reference to application or request for a loan. Just asking for funds. Am I correct?
Yes, Chair, you are right, Chair, that in this one there isn't. But the very first line says, this email refers to our discussion earlier this year.
Yes.
And that discussion was exactly that. But this email doesn't have that line in it.
And if I understand, you said to the chairperson, earlier, once your child had been admitted to the university, then they told you, your child has been admitted, this is X amount owing. And then you went to Mr. Agrizi and you asked for a loan. Am I right?
That's correct, Chair.
And then, so you had an exact amount that you asked for, am I right?
That's correct, Chair.
But if you read the last line of this email, it says, I'm in the process of sorting out the funding requirements for her and hereby request any assistance in this regard. You're not saying I'm requiring the amount we had agreed upon. It's as if you're now begging for money. Am I right?
Chairperson, if you go further, it says, thus I'm attaching the relevant documentation. Now, I don't know if my English is not up to speed, Chair, but if you read the whole sentence and not part of it, I say I'm asking for any amount, but here is the official school fees, the official statement.
I think you may be speaking at cross purposes at this stage. I thought Mr. Noche's question was this. If you had discussed with Mr. Grizzly a loan, why is it that in this email you make no reference to a loan, but instead you say you hereby request any assistance in this regard? And I think he added, you make as if you are begging now.
Yes.
I think that's what you are saying. So that's his question.
No, that was not the, I take the point, Chair.
Yes.
That is certainly not what was intended in this email. Maybe that's how it's interpreted, but
Yes.
I make reference to an earlier discussion.
Yes.
I make reference to this is the official obligation that I have to university. And that was my understanding of what I was asking for, Chairperson. I do take your point that line that says any funding might be out of place, but
Any assistance.
or any assistance, I beg your pardon, might be
Yes.
out of place,
Yes.
but that was the intention, and that was the essence of our discussions.
Mr.
Now, Mr. Smith, are there any documents you can present to this commission showing where the agreement was concluded, the interest on the loan? Or are there no such documents?
No, Chair, there were no such documents, and if the Commission is asking, was there a written loan agreement? There was no such documents. I'm not a lawyer, but my understanding is that this particular transaction didn't need a written agreement. So there was no such agreement.
Now, Mr. Smith, let me go back to my initial question. By this time, by 11th of May 2015, you knew Mr. Agrizi was working for BOSASA. Am I right?
Yeah, that's correct, Chair.
Did you know his position financially, how much money he had personally?
No, Chair, I didn't know how much money he had in the bank personally, Chair.
And you had just dealt with him on the basis that he's employed by BOSASA.
Chair, I had earlier alluded to the need for funding. I would have assumed that if it was not possible, at that point somebody would have said to me, look, it's not possible, Chairperson.
Now,
Maybe, I'm sorry, Mr. Noche, maybe let's go past this question. As I understand the position, the loan, if this was a loan that you asked Mr. Agrizi to give you, totaled about 600 and something thousand, 700,000?
600 and something thousand for 2 years.
600 and something
Yes,
thousand,
sir.
which was paid over 2 years in succession. Is that right?
Correct, Chairperson.
So it's quite a lot of money
Correct,
to
Chair.
ask for from an individual, isn't it?
Correct, Chair.
Yes, Mr. Noche.
and you said despite that, there was no written loan agreement and no terms discussed about interest.
No, there was no written agreement, Chair.
Sorry, no, continue.
There was no written agreement, Chair, as I indicated earlier on. I think it was a matter of trust, and if indeed there was going to be a requirement for a written agreement, I don't think it would have been it would have been a problem. It would have been a one-liner. Because in my own financial statements that are audited, it is raised as a loan, Chairperson. So there's in my mind, there was nothing untoward about it. It was there. It is still there now. It's public knowledge. And I don't recall either myself or Mr. Gritzi insisting on it being reduced into writing, Chair.
But you knew this company. He works for a company that had been alleged to be involved in corruption. Did it not ring to you that it is inappropriate for me as a member of a portfolio committee on correctional services to borrow money from a company that has tenders, that have been awarded tenders continuously by the same department, and here am I asking money from this company? Did not see that as inappropriate?
Chairperson, in 2015, I was no longer the chair of Correctional Services. I had ceased being the chair in April 2014. So it's not correct that I was the chair of Correctional. It was post my tenure, a year or so later, from being the chair of Correctional Services.
And were you still a member of the committee or not a member either?
Chair, in Parliament, we have what we call alternate members and full members. I had, at that point, been appointed to chair at least 2 other portfolio committees. So I spent all my time in the other portfolio committees. I hardly ever attended the portfolio committee proceedings of Correctional Services because I was chair of at least 2 other committees, Chair. And I was no longer the chair of the committee at the time is my senior politically. And I would never be able to undermine him in terms of influencing whatever happened. I was not the chair of that committee at the time.
And going back to that discussion between you and Mr. Agrizi about the loan, did Mr. Agrizi raise any concerns about this transaction that you were asking the 2 of you to enter into? Did he raise any concerns?
No, he didn't, Chair, because it happened in 2015 and it happened again in 2016.
Yes.
Yeah, so
yes, but I'm going back to the first
No, in the first one he didn't, sir.
Yes.
Sorry, I beg your pardon, he didn't, Chairperson.
Yes. So in the first discussion where you approached him and asked for a loan, he didn't raise any concerns.
He didn't raise any concerns to me, Chairperson, no.
Now, at that time already was the position that, was the understanding that in 2015 he would pay part of the 600 and something amount, and then in 2016 he would then pay another part, because in accordance with the requirements of the university.
No, Chair, it doesn't work like that.
Yeah.
The university gives you fees for that particular year.
Yeah.
She was first year.
Yes.
So the bill only was 200,000 rand.
Yes.
In 2015.
Okay.
So that was settled.
Yes, yes.
In 2016, there was no obligation on the 2015 anymore.
Okay.
There was a new fee structure.
Okay.
With a new amount, Chair. So
Okay.
it's not a continuation of 600,000.
Okay. But when you spoke to him for the first time asking for a loan, did you speak to him in 2015 only in regard to 2015, and then in 2016 you spoke to him in regard to 2016, or did you cover both years in your first discussion?
No, Chair, I didn't cover both years, and it's simply because there was no guarantee that my daughter would continue in that university, she'd be alive, or whatever the case might be.
Okay.
So at the time when the obligation became payable, then I would go and say, look, this is the new one, we've dealt with the old one, and this is how I'm going to repay you, because there was no issue about my inability to repay.
Yes, yes. How did Mr. Agrizi know that there would be no problem with you paying back in what, 8 years? When you spoke to him in 2015, it seems to me that on what you have said, you were the plan was that you would repay him in 8 years' time, 2023. How did he know that you would be able to pay him at that time? It's a long time.
Chair, I think
You referred to your shares. I know about
yes,
that.
I submitted it
Yeah.
in these things.
Yes.
I, in 2011, had a shareholder or was a partner in a company, and therefore I had the share agreement in 2011 already.
Yes. Yes.
In 2015, I received from the company correspondence that says, as things stand now in 2015, because it was very clear it was a long-term investment. It was going to take about 12 years for it to mature because it's a development of property. But in 2015, I received correspondence that says, as things stand now, this is what, if today everything stopped, this is what would be due to you per your shareholding. And it was that I gave as comfort that, look, it's going to be possible for me to pay it. Yes. And that is part of my affidavit or my annexures, Chair.
And did the documents from the company reflect that in 2023 you would get enough to pay him back the amount that you were asking for?
Yes, it did, Chair. More than that, Chair.
More than that.
Far more than that, Chair.
Yes.
It did reflect that as of 2015,
Yes.
on the basis of your shareholding,
Yes.
even at that point, it
Yes.
far exceeded.
Yes.
And 5 or 7 years down the line, it would just be
yes.
far, far much more, Chair.
Yes.
Yes.
Did
And
he
it
take the
reflected there.
Yes, I'm sorry, I interrupted you.
No, I said I did. Those documents are in the.
Yes. But did he take them? Did he keep some of those documents for his own peace of mind?
Chair, I don't know if he kept them for his own peace of mind, but I do know, even from his own affidavit, that he was aware of them, because initially he speaks about me being a BEE partner, which is not correct. And secondly, he says he knows that I had this business interest. So I'm not sure if he actually took the documents, but he certainly had sight of them at some point.
Yes. Well, my recollection is that in his affidavit, he says, maybe in both affidavits, that he refers to you in. He says, there was a time when you approached him for a loan that you wanted him to give you against your shares. I can't remember whether he said you wanted to sell him the shares or whether the shares were going to be the guarantee. But he separates that. He says that was after this transaction or of payment for your daughter. That's what he says as far as I remember. So if your version is correct, you had a discussion with him in which in 2015 you asked for a loan and you were going to use your shares as kind of security to say, look, this is where you will get your money in 8 years' time. On his version, the transaction relating to the payment of your daughter's university fees happened on a different occasion, and he says he didn't discuss that with you, as I understand what he says. He says Mr. Gavin Watson is the one who instructed him. He says on another occasion later, you approached him for a loan and you sought to use the shares. Either he says that was going to be security, or he says you wanted him to buy the shares, and he says I rejected that. That's my understanding of his version.
Correct, Chair.
Yes.
The email that I read earlier on referred to school fees, and that is why I provided the statement. On a different occasion, outside of the school fees, because that had been settled. I went to Mr. Gritzi because, again, as I said, it was a cash flow problem. I said, you know what, can we discuss a loan separate from that one? Because my security is sufficient to cover it. And that discussion went nowhere because it just didn't happen.
Yeah.
But it was that one that he refers to where he says that I was prepared to sell my shares. The agreement, the shareholder agreement, doesn't allow for that to happen. So there was never an intention. I couldn't sell my shares to a third party without going through my partners in any case. So it was never about selling shares. It was about, look, there is no reason not to accept that I would be in a position to pay you back. That's what it was for.
Mr. Nurture?
Actually, just to follow up and then to follow up what the chair has raised, turn to page 213.
Page 213.
Yes.
I'll let you have 5 minutes, Mr. Nurture. I see we are at 1.
Yes.
So I'll let you go on for 5
Yeah,
minutes. then
just finish. I'll just finish up this issue.
Yeah.
Page 213.
213 years. Sure, what I will do, Mr. Smith, is whilst you are looking, if you, 213.
Yes, I am there.
Yes, yeah. And this is the issue about the loans. It says on paragraph 20, this is the affidavit of Mr. Agrizi.
Yes, I do.
At paragraph 24.10, it says, subsequent to this payment, that is the payment for your daughter, so I became aware of the fact that Vincent Smith had an interest in Euroblitz.
Yes.
The payment for Vincent Smith's daughter's following year of study was paid to Euroblitz. So he says, subsequent to the first payment, he discovered that you've got Euroblitz. So it seems as if when he made the first payment, he didn't know that you've got Euroblitz.
That can't be possible because the payments were made to the same company. So it can't be subsequent to the first payment he found out that it was Euroblitz. When the first payment was made, I provided the banking details of the company. And in fact, deposit slips prove that it was paid into that very same account. So I don't understand what it means when he says subsequent to, or the following year only, he became aware.
I think what he may be meaning because he uses the word interest. Now he might be using that word in a legal sense. What he may be meaning is somebody could give you an entity's account and say, put that money into that account. They might not be shareholders. They might not have directors. They might not be a director in that company, but they know what arrangements they've made with the director or CEO of that company about that money. But if the person is a director or is a shareholder, that might be something else. So what he might be meaning is not necessarily to say he was hearing for the first time that you have some connection with this entity. He might have heard earlier that you have some connection because that's the entity you told him about. But that you are a shareholder, he might be meaning that's what he found out after. That's my thinking. He might not be meaning that, but that's my thinking.
That is also the reason why I refer this, that you'll see also, Mr. Smith, if you add what the chair is raising, the paragraph above, in 24.9, he confirms the money was paid, the first money was paid to Euroblitz. But then he says it's only after that he got to know that you have an interest in that company. It's not just a company with an account number, but you have an interest.
Chair, I am the sole shareholder of Euroblitz. I am the sole shareholder of Euroblitz. Euroblitz has been declared at Parliament in members' interest since its inception. So it was not a matter of I am a part or a shareholder with many other. I was the sole shareholder of Euroblitz. And even the documentation that regulates my shareholding indicates that Euroblitz is my company where I hold total shares, and therefore the shareholding is for me. So it's not, we shouldn't confuse Euroblitz and the, for want of a better word, the joint venture. Euroblitz is my company where I as alone am a shareholder. And it is that company that I used for the loan so that I could pay it back, because my shares would come into that company, and through that company I would pay to whoever gave me the money. So I was the sole shareholder, that's the point that I'm making, of Euroblitz.
I think the position would be, on your version, he may have known or would have known that you were the shareholder, actually maybe the sole shareholder, from the first discussion you had with him. But on his version, it might not follow that he knew that you were the shareholder, but he acknowledges that that's the name of the entity that you gave to him as the entity into which the money should be paid. Yeah. Okay.
No, I think that's, yes.
Yeah.
Just before we adjourn, Mr. Smith, can you refer us, and then I want to look at it during lunch time, to this document? You say it is the loan document, the document which proves your investment?
Yes. Which document is it?
The one you say it proves your investment.
The whole share.
Yeah, I'm asking if you got the page number, Chair. You're asking me to find it for you.
Yes, please. What you can do, Mr. Smith, you don't have to wait for it now. Let's adjourn.
You can look at it during the lunch.
Lunchtime, you can tell me during lunchtime, or we come back to it.
Chair, yes, I will certainly do that, Chair, but even if it's not in here, I can certainly make it provided before the end of business today.
Yes.
But I would look at it at lunchtime.
Yes, okay, no, that's fine. Okay, we'll take the lunch adjournment now. It's 5 minutes past. We will resume at 2:05.
Thank you,
We
Chair.
adjourn.
Oh, shit.